Well, hello everybody. I hope you enjoyed that movie we watched showing how the population of the world increased over the last 2,000 years. I think that's a really effective video. Um, it shows the pace at which the population has changed, I think, much better than, say, a graph like this. But this graph does a pretty good job too. This graph, and this is, that movie only took place in the last 2,000 years from 0 to 2010. But this graph shows us broken here the population growth for the last 2 million years. So we can see that the human population was did not change very much for a long, long time. But there's a few things that made the Earth's population for humans grow quickly. First thing, well, we were hunters and gatherers in the beginning, and our population didn't change much at all. But what made our population grow in the beginning was the agricultural revolution, which happened about 10,000 years ago. So 10,000 years ago, we started growing food and living in cities. We were protecting each other. We had food stores. Um, People led safer lives. It was still hard work, but we started, um, our population growth really started. But it was going up, but very slowly. Over the period of 8,000 years, it got to be maybe, a half a billion people. So that's growth, but it took a long time. Excuse me. The next thing that really got our population growing was the Industrial Revolution. Now, the Industrial Revolution kicked in and our population went through the roof. Um, that's what we're going to start studying this week. There were times, if you noticed in that video, that there were population reductions when those dots did disappear. During the plague that happened, during the Mongol invasion that happened, during the Crusades that happened, a lot of people dying. But those were always short-lived times. Um, maybe a couple hundred years, but then the population grew again. So the overall trend is this exponential growth that we've been talking about. But look at that graph. I mean, can that graph continue for very long? I mean, is that sustainable? I think we know when we talked about moose that there was no way the moose were going to live on that island for very long before something happened. Why should humans be any different? So if we look at the numbers, if this population growth at our current rate continued, by the year 2100, we would have 19 billion people on the planet. Right now, we have about 7.6 billion people. By 2200, we'd have 59 billion. By the year 2300, we'd have 182 billion. Now, these numbers are getting so big, they're almost meaningless. By 2400, we'd have 560 billion. And by the year 2500, we'd have 1,720 billion people. There's just not enough space. Is that going to happen? I don't think so. So what is going to happen? Well, nobody really thinks that this continual growth is going to happen. There's a lot of signs, and this is what we're going to study this week, that the Earth's population is already slowing down. And this is a more reasonable estimation. They think even by the year 2100, we might have reached the maximum, which would be about 10 or maybe 11 billion people. Some people thought that we might peak a little earlier. This green curve is most likely not going to happen because we're almost at 8 billion already. So no one really thinks we're going to go up. We know that's not going to happen. We are slowing this curve down, just like that coronavirus. We're slowing the curve, and we're going to find out why that's happening. Let's take a look at this. This is the human population clock. This is keeping track of the world's population. It seems a little old. I'm going to use these numbers, although I think they're a little off. I thought we were at 7.8 billion, but this is showing us at 7.6 billion people in the world and 329 million for our population. So what's making these numbers go up and down? This is for the United States over here. So we have one birth every 8 seconds of the US in the US. So you can see this bar right here showing 8 seconds. Oh, we got one more. Another 8 seconds, one more. And this bar right here is showing a death every 11 seconds. So it seems like there are fewer people dying than are being born. So if that's the case, then our population has to be increasing. But what else affects population? Well, here we have migration coming, going away from the country. There are some people who leave the country, and that's going to make our population go down. But at the same time, we have people entering the country, and that makes our population go up. That's emigration versus immigration. So those are the 4 factors, and we'll talk a little about those in a minute. The rate of growth is not the same everywhere in the world. So if we look at this graph here, we can see that in the industrialized countries, that's like the United States and in Europe, Brazil, the growth is just not that much. But in the developing countries, countries that are not as developed, you can see the population is growing much, much, much faster. And so we have to look at the differences between the 2 different, what's going on in those countries. And we're going to learn about that in the next video. But what changes a population size? I would write this in your notebook, this circle with these arrows going in. Or you can draw the arrows one at a time. But what changes a population size? We just looked at this in those statistics. Well, the first thing that's going to change, what's going to make a population increase? We got babies, births. When there are births, our population increases. So we have to put that in our circle. Births make the population go up. So we have it going into the total population. Well, what else affects a population? Well, people die. That's going to affect the population. So we have a death rate. So we're going to run a right deaths coming out of the population because that makes the population go down. But what were those 2 other things that affect populations? We have people coming into the country. We have immigration. And maybe some of you immigrated into this country. That's certainly going to make our population go up. So we have immigration, just like births, makes the population go up. These people were not born here, but they're coming into the country, so that makes the population increase. And then similarly, if we have people who are leaving the country, I couldn't really find a good picture of emigration, so I got a picture of this. But this person's leaving. That is called emigration. That's when you decide to leave the country. And there are people leaving the country all the time. So we're going to write emigration down over here. So these 4 things are going to affect a country. And they're going to affect any population, a population of moose or wolves or snails or anything. Now, in the wild, it's very difficult to study immigration and emigration. It's hard to keep track of that. So really, we focus on births and death. And that's what we're going to be doing in our study on the human population as well. Immigration and emigration are just difficult to study, and that's why we study islands. Like that population of moose was a really good thing to study. It's the longest population study ever that we've ever done, that humans have ever done. Because it was an island, we know there's not immigration or emigration. And so it's really easy to study, or easier. So we focus on births and deaths. So that's it for this video. I'm going to have the next thing to do is a little knowledge check. And then our next video, we're going to look into the difference that a country experiences when it goes through an industrial revolution.